Halloween is just around the corner, so why don't we talk about something spooky? Why don't we talk about ghosts? Specifically, when your SMEs ghost you, what do you do? When they vanish on you, your project is essentially dead in the water until you can help to get them back on track. So, today, I want to be able to share with you some stories, some past examples, and to be able to give you the best possible advice I can about how to be able to re engage with SMEs who have been ghosting you. So, hopefully, these tips help you out. And by the way, too, speaking of helping, why don't you help me out? Subscribe to this channel. A bunch of you watch it, not as many subscribe. Would love to be able to see more of you subscribe to this. And in return, I promise I'll keep on making more Learning Nerd videos. With that being said, let's dive on in to my top best tips to be able to help you out with my very last tip, the ultimate I'm gonna pull the lever to be able to try and save this project kind of a tip. So here we go. My first tip is to reach out in a different way. I'm going to make an assumption here that when you first met your subject matter expert, you were probably introduced via email. So, because of that, you kept the lines of communication open via email. I'm sure you met with them over in person, Zoom, or something along those lines, but you're probably using email to go back and forth with one another. Now, here's the problem with that. If I'm thinking about the easiest way to either forget about someone or to intentionally not respond back to them, email is the surefire way of being able to do so. Think about how many times that someone's emailed you and you're like, oh, we'll just respond back to them later. And then later never comes. So that could be happening in your project. So here's what you're going to do. Go into your inbox, find their signature from the last time that they communicated with you, and see, is their phone number at the bottom of their signature? If it is, that is free game to be able to call them and to try to get their attention that way. Sometimes just breaking things up in that simple of a manner of a phone call, all of a sudden they're now like, wait, they're calling me. Is everything okay? What's going on? And that's just enough to be able to get their attention. Same thing goes for texting. I've even done WhatsApp before because that was their number in the signature. So whatever way is currently in there, that is fair game, and I would reach out to them that way in order to change things up a bit. Next tip. Make it easier for them to respond back to you. You are an educated, polite, and respectful person. So I'm going to guess that when you are communicating with your SMEs via email, here is what you do is that you set this up in a way where you give a greeting, you say, I hope all is well, you provide an elaborate backstory for why you are reaching out to them and wasting their precious time, and then you finally deliver the ask at the very bottom. So, if that's how you normally communicate, because that's what I used to do for every email I would send to my subject matter experts, I realized that's way too much information. There's like way too much fluff. It doesn't get to the heart of the matter. So you can change it up in this manner by being direct instead. And if you normally send over these types of 2 to 3 paragraph emails, and all of a sudden you're delivering one-liners, that's different. That is going to trigger a response. And of course, I'm not saying to not be polite or anything of a sort, but just be direct. So let's say that I'm trying to be able to get a hold of my subject matter expert. We're trying to be able to book for a filming session. I would simply say, hi, Jordan, the studio is free at Thursday at 1 p.m. Does that time work for you? Thank you, Luke. And done. There you go. Short, sweet, to the point. If you can do that, that might trigger that type of response. Another type of an idea that goes into this as well, my friend swears by this. I haven't done it personally, but she tells me up and down it works, so I'm going to share it with you, is to go into that type of an ask and make the font bold for your type of question. So if you do have all of this information, but then your clear type of ask is at the bottom in bold font, that might just make their eyes wander down, see that, and then say, okay, I'm going to respond back to this, and there you go. Best case scenario, they try to be able to respond back to you quickly, or they might reach back out to you for more information, and then you can go from there. My next tip is to be persistent. So think about this for a moment. How many times do you communicate with your SME on a weekly basis? If you're not hearing back from them and your answer is that you communicate with them once a week, well, it's time for you to really crank that up. Try to be able to communicate with them 2 times a week, 3 times a week, whatever you need to be able to do to get their attention. That's what I would do. Of course, I know this feels kind of slimy and gross that you're going to be essentially blowing up their phone or their inbox in order to get their attention. But oftentimes what I have heard is that if I'm reaching out to this person more and more and more, eventually I will get a message that says like, hey, Luke, now it's not a good time, but can you reach out to me Friday at 1 p.m.? I'll have time then to be able to chat with you. Like, okay, great. And of course, when I then meet up with them, I will start off by apologizing because I just blasted their phone or their inbox for the last couple of weeks, but it got their attention, and then we can move on to the next part of the project. You can always apologize later. We need to be able to get this person focused and back on track. So be persistent, be relentless, and over-communicate. It feels weird, but it's going to get the job done. The next tip is to use your network. We are starting to become a little bit more strategic with our planning, and here is one of my best tips for you. And this is to think about how much influence and power you have within your organization. How much weight does your name carry? If you are reaching out to SMEs and you are simply not hearing back, one type of tactic that you can do is to be able to pull in someone within your organization who does have more power and more influence. And when that name goes into your SME's inbox, they are going to respond back to that person. So I do this quite a bit actually with my boss, where if there is something that is more urgent or time sensitive, and I'm not trying to be able, or I'm not simply hearing back from my SMEs, I'll actually connect with her and say, would you mind sending out this email? You can copy me, like I've already written it up, but I want you to actually send this out because I think you're going to get a faster response back than I'm going to get. And surprisingly, this actually works out quite well. So, same thing. Think about where you are within your organization, and if you can have your boss send out that email. In some cases, I've even had my boss's boss send out the email because the project was a huge type of an ordeal, and we were not hearing back from a person in time, and it really wasn't going so well. So I had to pull all the levers that I could think of. The other thing that you can do too, along these same lines, is that you don't always need this to be your boss. Instead, if you can just have this actually be a colleague or a peer and just have a different name send over a type of request, you might actually be surprised for how many times this really does work. I think about every time that I take a vacation, which is very rare, but if I'm out of the office and I ask a colleague to be able to send out a message while I'm away, then I'll hear back from them and they're like, oh yeah, I heard back from that SME. They responded back right away. It's like, of course, well, I've been trying to get a hold of them for weeks, but once again, the difference of a name caught them by surprise, and then they responded back. So give that a try. And my best tip for you folks is to use your SMEs network. Okay, what do I mean by this? If you are working on a project, and let's say that you have multiple SMEs, it's not uncommon that you might be working with 2 or 3 or more SMEs at a time. If they happen to know one another, if they're colleagues, if they've worked on past projects before, use that to your advantage. When you have a message that comes from one SME reaching out to another SME that says like, hey, Luke's been trying to get a hold of you. He hasn't heard back. We're waiting on you to submit this type of item for us to be able to go into the next steps of the project. Can you communicate with him, connect, and let's go from there. That adds a whole different sense of pressure, of urgency, of importance, because now it's coming from their colleague who they deeply respect and trust, and that is going to really get things going. This is also like the final lever I'm going to pull if I am truly stuck. And this, of course, could be via email. It could be them actually seeing them in person, because for many of the SMEs who I work with, I'm not in the same building as them. So I will say, hey, can you actually just go down the hall, or the next time you see so-and-so, can you just poke in their office and just let them know that I sent over a request in their inbox? If they can reach back out to me, that'd be awesome. And they are more than willing to do that because, of course, this other person is stalling the project, and that they can help to get them back on track for us, they're going to do so. That by far is the very best tip that I can give you. If you are truly, truly stuck, use their network to your advantage. Well, folks, those are the best tips that I can give you if a SME is ghosting you and you're trying to be able to re-engage with them. Tell me, are there any other types of tips that work for you? Go down below in the comments section, share away, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Once again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Other than that, that is all I have for you. Stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.